Speaking. Welcome. We bid you welcome. I guess you could call this the 5 count, even though it's not going to talk about wrestling today.
That's
My
right.
co-captain, John the Music Nut. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, my friend. How about you?
I'm only going on about 3 or 4 hours of sleep. Because going on that wrestling thing, I was up in Huntsville, which is about a 2 hour drive from where I live here in Birmingham for a WWE live house show. So yeah, I didn't get to bed till about midnight. And then
Mm.
I'm wide awake, or I'm awake about 4 o'clock, and I'm up and running at work, and about trying to kill me. So it's like anyway. So yeah, so I'm only operating on 3 or 4 hours sleep. You can't tell, can you? No, no. Anyway, so today we're speaking of the whole work thing. These are things we're going to dream about. If we could, and I think it was Martin Popoff, I believe, that coined this phrase.
Yes.
If we could just retire from work, from the work atmosphere that we do, and we could devote our time to listening to certain artists' discographies, who would they be? So the term was called retirement projects. And I know all of us, I mean, John and I both were in our 50s, and we're both dreaming of that one day when we can retire. Might not happen for me, but who knows? We'll see. But we have some artists that we're going to talk about that we might have an album or two or three or so, but they have such an extensive catalog that we're like, the only way we can really certainly appreciate it is if could retire. So, John, I'm going to let you kick it off with your first pick.
All right. Thanks, John.
Yes.
I'm big into jazz music, and this is Ornette Coleman. He's a
Okay.
legend in jazz. This is an 8 CD set by Ornette Coleman featuring his stuff from 57 to 62, including the album The Shape of Jazz to Come, which is considered a classic in jazz. But this is the tip of the iceberg for him. He's got a ton of albums, and all I have is this 8 CD set and his last live album, which was called Sound Grammar. And I only have that on a burned CD that
Hmm.
I bought from eMusic. But I really love Ornette's music. I I I've been wanting to do a deep dive on him for a long time, but it's just there's so much music you're discovering and there's so little time. So, but this is definitely the first one that came to my mind, and this is the one that I have the most music by. Like, there's a lot of jazz musicians that I like a lot of their stuff, but I have a lot of their stuff too. Like
Mm-hmm.
Miles Davis, I have a lot of his stuff, but he's put out so much. They put out so much of his stuff after he passed on. Like I have some of that stuff too. But
Right.
Ornette, I don't have too much. And the next musician I talk about, who's also jazz, I have a whopping one. So Ornette Coleman.
Okay. All right. I am not familiar with him. What is his main instrument?
He saxophone.
Saxophone. Okay. I think you may have
Yeah.
said that. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Man, good jazz saxophone. Well, you gotta love that.
And he
Cool.
played and he played, I mean, he just died a few years ago. I mean,
Hmm.
he lived to be in his 80s
Right.
and he was out there until nearly the very end.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
like
That's
that
a
Sound Grammar album. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that Sound Grammar album, and he was like in his late 70s when we recorded that, and that was a monster of an album.
nice.
Yeah,
Nice. Okay. All right. That's another one to check out.
right.
Well, I'm going to stay in kind of the jazz field here. With my first pick. So now, no surprise, me being a guitar player, that one of the probably most of the people I'm going to pick are going to be kind of guitar oriented. So the first one that I'm going to pick is Larry Carlton.
Nice.
And this is his particular album called On Solid Ground. Now, before I go into that album, of course, now us being Steely Dan fans, we know that he appears on at least four of their albums. But and Royal Scam being one of them, which is probably one of my all-time favorite albums by them. But my goodness, when you look at his list of session work, I mean, he's done sessions for everybody from Paul Anka to Lorna Wright. I think is Lorna Wright, and so many people in between. It's just all over the place. Mostly a jazz fusion, does some pop, a little bit of pop, maybe some jazz rock kind of feel, but he has such a lyrical sound to his guitar playing, and I think that comes from probably his influences of like guys like Joe Pass and Barney Hassett, maybe Wes Montgomery, and probably even B.B. King, bringing the blues into there. Of course, you'll also know he was also on the Hill Street Blues theme. That's a well-known song, that he plays guitar for. But and I actually have two other albums of his. These are earlier albums. This one's called Strikes Twice. I was just listening to this a little bit earlier. He actually does some singing on this album, and he's got a really cool voice. I really kind of dug that. And then you have this one here called Sleepwalker. And he was always known for playing these Gibson 335s too. And I think he was he had a studio called Room 335. So going back to On Solid Ground. So the reason I got into this album was I learned that Larry Carlton was the victim of like a studio. He was coming from his studio, and he was a victim of like a studio invasion, and he was actually shot in his neck, and he had suffered some a little bit of minor paralysis at the time, which he was able to rehab. And there was a lot of things he had to kind of relearn, but he was able to get back on track. And then he puts out this very stellar album, has him doing Steely Dan's Josie, which is a wonderful track. He also does a take on Layla of Derek and the Dominoes, and a lot of other just original stuff. But there's just such a lyrical quality to his guitar playing, and it's just so smooth. God, just a wonderful sound. So yeah, there you go, Larry Carlton. Gosh, he's got just so many. I couldn't even count how many albums it is. So there's so many live albums, so many studio albums, but again, all the studio session stuff is just immense. So Larry Carlton, that's my first pick.
Nice. Very good. As a Steely Dan junkie, yeah, you gotta love Larry Carlton.
Oh, Kid Charlemagne, Don't Take Me Alive. I mean, especially, just classic, legendary.
Absolutely. All right. So my second pick is Sun Ra. Sun Ra was a piano player, but he was an innovator. He was a composer. He was a very restless jazz musician, much like Ornette Coleman.
Mm-hmm.
But Sun Ra went to another level as far as eclectic.
Right.
All over the place. He went very avant-garde. He started out doing less like traditional jazz and a lot of bebop, but eventually he was covering a lot of African music.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing a lot of avant-garde and swing and all kinds of stuff. And he's kind of like Frank Zappa in the fact that he's got a ton of albums.
Yeah.
Well, he's no longer with us, but he lived to be an old age. But I only have one album by him, and it's Languidity from 1978.
Ooh, okay.
Here it is. It's a burned copy from eMusic.
All right.
But I listened to this for the first time in a few years today, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember this vividly. But he's another jazz musician that I've always been intrigued by.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got a catalog that's the thing. It's gonna be hard to see how much of this stuff is in print. Ornette Coleman, this one that I talked about before, you can get this 8 CD set for $15 on Amazon.
Okay.
It's not. It's well, I should say it's an 8 album 4 CD set. Um, Sun Ra, his stuff is not quite that cheap. But some of his stuff is gonna probably cost me some dollars down the line. But he's somebody I definitely want to go all in on
Oh
once I
yeah.
get that chance to do it. But yeah, Sun Ra, I'm sorry I don't have an original to show you, but this is all I have. So there
There
you
you
go.
go. All right. Yeah. I've now Sun Ra I have heard of. Yeah. Yeah, that would be that would definitely be one to go deep diving into. Yeah,
Hmm.
good choice. Good
Thank
choice.
you.
All right, sticking with the jazz. This guy first came to prominence in the jazz fusion band Return to Forever. So, and this is the only actual physical copy of anything I have by him, but Al Di Meola.
Hmm.
But I do have the um Elegant Gypsy album on on a digital format, and that's where I first heard. I heard that, and I heard Casino, the album that came
Okay.
after that. Golly, mostly jazz fusion, flamenco, Mediterranean sounds, but good Lord, he could play. Man, he was whipping out these fast legato lines that were just, it's like, who's doing that kind of these fast runs like that in the mid 70s like that?
No
It just
doubt.
wasn't happening like that. But then, my goodness, he'd get on that flamenco guitar with guys like Paco de Lucia and John McLaughlin, and oh my goodness, it's just like guitar heaven right there. Yeah, he's got 26 albums, only one live album out of all that, but a
Wow.
lot of collaborations with John McLaughlin and Paco de Lucia and a few others. But man, I've always loved Al's smooth style of that fast playing when he would whip those licks out. And again, that jazz fusion feel with that mixed with that Mediterranean stuff and the flamenco. He just had his own kind of sound. And I recently picked this up. This is called World Sinfonia, the Grand Passion. So I haven't had a chance to listen to this yet. I just found it at my local store, Seasick Records, and I thought, hey, this is something else I wanted to pick up. So, um, this looks like it's like almost like a concept album of sorts, I guess. But anyway, it just seems interesting. But Al Di Meola, just wonderful, wonderful player. I think of like down the southern Race with Devil and the Southern Highway, uh, something like that. Anyway, great track with that dun 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 dun. All these crazy little sounds. But man, just a great album. So Al Di Meola.
Great choice. I have Land of the Midnight Sun.
Yeah.
That's a great record. And I've actually seen him live. I saw him a couple of years ago with an acoustic trio. It was
Oh,
just, oh, it
God.
very tasteful. Everyone
Oh,
was, oh my God, we were all into it. Yeah.
wow.
It was at Sellersville Theater in 2021.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've always wanted
that
to
was
go
a
to
good
Sellersville
show.
Theater. Good stuff.
Yeah, that was a good show. But yeah, I co-sign with you on Al Di Meola. He's great. And you mentioned John McLaughlin. There's another great one right
Oh,
there.
golly. I mean, even just getting into like Mahavishnu Orchestra and all that, and then all the other stuff he's gotten into. Good Lord. Yeah, that would be another one.
Oh yes. Mahavishnu, this Mahavishnu stuff is insane.
Yeah.
And just the stuff he did with Miles before that.
Yeah.
That would be another great one. Yeah. Al Di Meola. Yeah. He's
Yeah.
great.
Good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So my number 3 is a singer-songwriter. He made his name in a band you probably know called The Jam.
Okay.
And then after that, before I get into his next project, The Jam were one of the best bands that never made it in the States, but in the UK, they were absolutely huge
Mm-hmm.
because the singer-songwriter I'm talking about is Paul Weller. But he made 6 studio albums with The Jam, which I love to death, and I have them all. And then he started a band called the Style Council. And this is their first album, which was originally released in UK, called Cafe Blue. When they released it in the States, it was called My Ever Changing Moods. The last album he did with the Jam was The Gift. And that album, he really went hard into R&B. And this is kind of what broke the Jam up, because he was searching while the other two guys in the band, they kind of wanted to stay more into that punk sound. So, but Paul Weller kept searching, and on the albums he did with the Jam, he was also doing some rap when rap was really in its infancy. I'm not going to say that stuff works the greatest, but he made a few albums with the Jam. This is their most successful, but 2 or 3 of their albums sold really well in UK. Then he went solo. I have none of his solo stuff. That's the deep dive for me.
Oh boy.
Because I've always wanted to get into his solo stuff. I just haven't had the time. And his stuff's very easily accessible. I can pick up a ton of albums right now if I want to, but I want to have the time to fully digest them and digest the lyrics too.
Yeah.
But Paul Weller is one of the great singer-songwriters, and I gotta dig more into his stuff, because right now it's just the Jam's like 90% of my knowledge of Paul Weller. And I mean, the Jam alone are fantastic, but I want to dig deeper, and one day I will do it with Paul Weller.
Yeah. You know, I'm familiar with the Jam. I mean, I've heard the name. I don't know. I don't know if I know a song by them off the top of my head. I know of the Style Council. Again, I probably know a song or two, but it's just not coming to me at the moment. And I know the name Paul Weller, but boy, that's not one that's been on my radar. So that's going to be that would be a good deep dive, especially if you're really wanting to get into the lyrics, because if he gets really deep with lyrics, then that could be a good homework project kind of thing. So,
well, the thing with Paul was he sang a lot about life in England.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very topical songwriter,
right?
Like the Clash were, and the Clash and the Jam came up at the same time. The Clash were singing about things going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
The Jam's stuck with the UK,
right?
And a lot of people say about the Jam, the reason they never crossed over in the States is they were too British, because his voice was very distinctly British.
I think they would call that a very British problem.
Yeah, I mean, it was like they'd say about Slade.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Slade, I mean, Slade are fantastic, but the thing everyone said was they were too British. I love Slade.
Mm-hmm.
I think Slade were fantastic.
Yeah.
But the same thing happened with Paul Weller. But if you know his music, I mean, it's just a career of riches, and one that I definitely want to go deep on. And yeah, the Jam. Oh gosh, yeah. Have you ever heard That's Entertainment?
I may have. I just have to listen to it and see if I recognize it.
Either that or Town Called Malice were probably the most popular songs in the States. They weren't top 40 hits,
right?
But those would probably be ones that maybe you heard in passing.
Okay.
It might be something that you might listen to later and go, "Oh, I remember this."
Like Little Chicken.
Yeah. So exactly. So it's like they're really influential. Like a band like The Offspring or Green Day.
Sure.
You hear the hits by the Jam, and you're like, "Well, this is where Green Day got their sound."
Yeah.
You know, especially Green Day.
Right.
Yeah. So Paul Weller. Yeah.
Okay.
One day.
All right. Very, very cool.
Thanks.
So this will be my first lyrical entry into this foray. And another group that was apparently known for writing some pretty cutting and acerbic lyrics, as they were described as. Yeah, I'm talking about the Mail brothers of Sparks, Russell and Ron. You know, this lovely little album here called Kimono My House. So this was their breakthrough album. This was like their third album they did. where they traveled to the UK because they wanted to get involved in some of that glam rock sound, and as I'm listening to now, the funny thing with this album is I was introduced to this as a child. I didn't hear it, but my brother had it. He had a vinyl copy of it, but I never heard it. And he actually got to see them in concert back in the day at this little theater of ours in our hometown, where he's same place he saw Alex Harvey, which still blows my mind. He saw the sensational Alex Harvey band, but when you listen to Kimono My House, there's parts of this album to me that it sounds like if Geddy Lee was singing in a falsetto voice with, and he's and the backing band is the Beatles, but they're playing it more like a glam rock, like maybe like a Sweet or a Ziggy Stardust, David Bowie era, that early glam rock kind of sound. It kind of has that kind of feel. I don't, and I don't know how else to really describe it, but this is a very interesting album. Sparks, though, is another one of those bands. They've got like 25 studio albums. They've been through all kinds of different, sounds between like art pop and glam, electronic, new wave, power pop, disco, even a little rock and some hard rock, I think, in there. They worked with Giorgio Moroder for a while in the disco period. So there's a lot of stuff here that, again, that would be, they didn't really chart much in the US. I think about 7 of their albums actually charted in the US, but I think they did a little bit better in Britain. But I think it's just one of those really quirky, eclectic kind of bands that really just appeals to like a certain diverse kind of people, and not the general masses. The general masses aren't going to get some of their stuff, I think. But and especially if you can get past the singer, which was that's Russell. He was the singer. So he has this, at least on this album, he sings, like I said, he has this high register, and it really does kind of sound like Geddy Lee at times, but then he does these falsetto stuff, and it's just, but it all fits the music, and it very much is this glam rock kind of, I don't know if I want to go as far as Slade on this thing, right, but it certainly has that glam rock feel. And I kind of was digging it, but it's like these guys have, I'm like, it's almost like a Frank Zappa thing, but there's like, these guys have more lyrical songs, whereas Frank went more into instrumental. But man, this would be somebody that there's a nagging part of my brain that really wants to dive deep into Sparks, and what the Mail Brothers were all about. Russell, Ron, the keyboard player, was pretty much the primary songwriter in the band. So I think Russell would come along with some things here and there, but for the most part, Ron was the main genius. And Ron, I mean, you can kind of see him there. Ron's the guy that looks like Hitler here.
Yeah.
And I remember that from my when my brother had this album. I'm like, I knew for some reason I knew of who Hitler was. I don't know why, but for some reason I learned of who that was, and I'm like, why does he have a Hitler mustache, or why does he look like that? I don't know. But then you just have this really weird cover, and I don't even know what all that is. But anyway, Sparks, that would be another one that definitely a retirement project. And I know they have a documentary out there, which I've not yet had the chance to see, but I've heard is really, really good. So
nice.
Hopefully worth checking out.
Oh, definitely. I knew one song by them, which was the closest thing they had to a hit here in the States, and that was Cool Places.
Okay.
That was the song they did with Jane Whelan from the Go-Go's.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine, who's no longer with us, but he was probably the most eclectic musical guy I've ever known in my life, on a whim just said, I'm going to make you a Sparks CD.
Oh, man.
And I remember loving it, and I never went further with it. And I gotta dig that CD up because we were making each other mix CDs all the time, but full disclosure, he was introducing me to a lot more stuff than I was introducing to him. Um, but once in a while I kept winning, go, wow, I missed this one. But he was hitting me with a lot of good stuff.
Wow.
Like 10cc, he got me into them, and I only knew the hits. He goes, oh, you don't know
You
much
don't know
about 10cc
you don't
then.
know much about 10cc if you only know the hits. Yeah.
Right. So that's another band. Yeah, I'm gonna probably follow you on that one someday.
I don't
And
I honestly don't know how accessible to getting like physical copies of a lot of their stuff is,
mhm,
but I'd have to do a search on that. But
right.
I'm sure they have everything on digital if you just want to go the cheating way. But if you're like us and you want to read, have that physical copy in your hands. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll just have to see how accessible it is. But yeah, like I said, 25 studio albums. That's just amazing. But
Oh yeah. That'll be a fun journey.
whew,
All right. Yes. My
all right.
next one, I only have one album by them. It was the only one that really sold in the United States. And they have about 25 albums. You remember The Church?
Yes, I've heard that. I've heard the band name. I again couldn't tell you a song, but I know the name.
Their one big hit in the States was Under the Milky Way off of the
Oh,
Starfish album.
okay. Okay, I think
That's
I
the
remember
only
that
album
one.
I have. That album and one other one I have a burn copy of.
Hmm.
But they have about 25 albums and they're still putting albums out every few years. I've seen them live. I seen them do the whole Blurred Crusade album live, but you
Hmm.
couldn't get the CD at the show because it was out of print.
Ah,
And that was 8 years ago. And back then it was $30 to find like a used copy. You ever have a band where their CDs were really reasonable and you said one day I'll get into them, and then you think about it a few years later and now the CDs are out of print? That's what happened with me with The Church.
hmm.
I wanted to get Heyday when it was $6. I loved everything I heard off and I'm like, oh, this is my jam here, because it was more fiery than the stuff they would do later.
Right.
Like Starfish and Gold Afternoon Fix, etc. But I stupid me didn't buy it then, and now it probably would probably be some bucks. But they are a band that everything I've heard by them, and I have listened to their later stuff, I'm really into. They have this very dream pop sound to them, but they can rock out hard when they need to, and they were great songwriters.
Yeah.
And I think they still have two of the original members, but that's one album. And in this country, that and maybe the greatest hits albums are the only ones that really sold. But one day,
Yep.
probably when I'm not in the corporate world anymore,
Right.
that's when I'm going to take the deep dive on The Church.
There you go. Yeah, another band. I probably know that one song, but after that, probably not much. So yeah, so this is going to be a nice expansion for me to check into. So
Mm-hmm. Oh
so
yeah.
sticking with that whole dreamy feeling. So the next guy I'm going to talk about, we're going back into some instrumental stuff, and this guy came into prominence, and this was like in the early 70s, and this guy had a little bit of help with this little movie that came out called The Exorcist. And I'm talking about Mike Oldfield and Tubular Bells.
Mm-hmm.
That one little beginning part of Tubular Bells you would hear in The Exorcist. And of course, The Exorcist was a huge movie back in the day, very controversial movie, but it did very well at the box office. So a lot of people that's how they probably discovered Mike Oldfield. Maybe they probably went a little deeper, but Here's the thing. So here's the original. This is the original Tubular Bells version.
Right.
The orchestral Tubular Bells.
Nice.
Tubular Bells 2003. Tubular Bells 2. Tubular Bells 3. Are you getting a picture here?
Yes.
Let's see. A 50th anniversary celebration of Tubular Bells, which doesn't have him on it, but it's like some studio musicians and playing this, and a 50th anniversary remix or remix of the original Tubular Bells. Everybody knows him by Tubular Bells.
That's how I know him.
But wait, there's more. So this is his second album. This one's called Haggerty Ridge. This has a very nice dreamy ethereal quality to it. I was just listening to it again. Has a little, you just really feel like you're in the British Highlands somewhere. It's just like, it just really has this beautiful feel. Yes, you have some punches of guitars and different things like that, but boy, there's a beauty about this. And the thing with Mike Oldfield is his usual thing is that he does 2 long opuses, one per side. That's usually his shtick. His third album called Almadon, same kind of thing. You have these long opuses. This has kind of I don't know, almost a little bit of a Celtic almost feel, but there's just again this beautiful new agey, proggy kind of feel to his stuff. And he wanted to revisit Almadon, and he eventually did, and this was his final album called Return to Almadon. So again, you have that return to that feel. 25 studio albums, only one actual live album if you don't count the Tubular Bells orchestral stuff. Or no, excuse me, back up. I lost count of how many. 26 studio albums. That's I was reading my wrong notes. 26 studio albums. So he's got much more than just Tubular Bells, and it is certainly worth looking into, especially for me liking stuff like Haggerty Ridge and Almadon, Return to Almadon. There's so much more to him than just the Tubular Bells. Fun little trivia thing here. When you get to the end of that first opus of the first Tubular Bells, you have the master of ceremonies coming in, who would usually say the names of the different instruments. So you have like the double speed guitar, introducing acoustic guitar, and all these different things. And then you finally, plus the tubular bells. You get this grand entrance of the Tubular Bells. Well, in the original version, you have a guy named Viv Stanshall. Now, you probably have no idea who Viv Stanshall is, right?
Nope.
Okay, so there was this British band that came out in the 60s called let's see, I want to get this right. A Bonzo Dog Doodah Band. There's a name for you.
Yeah.
So what they were known for was they were featured on a pre-Monty Python TV show from 3 of the guys. It was called Do Not Adjust Your Set. And they would do these little comedic music interlude things. One of the guys in the band, Neil Innes, would eventually join Monty Python on like tours and stuff, and he would do different music things. And I think he would do stuff with Eric Idle. I think he was in the Ruddles and different things like that. So there was that connection there. But they had this Viv, the singer, and he just kind of had this weird singing style, but it was pretty cool to watch some of these old shows. But anyway, so he's the original master of ceremonies. When he did the 2003 version, he got John Cleese to do it. He of course from Monty Python, and right. he puts in his double speed guitar, and he does these goofy he adds the Monty Python feel into it, so it's really pretty cool. Anyway, this opus on side 2 ends with the sailor's hornpipe, which is really he does a really fun version of that. It's to me, I just love listening to those. My sister had this when I was growing up. She had a piano thing of it, so she actually probably could play. She could probably sight read it and play it on the piano, and at least the little intro part of it. But yeah, Mike Oldfield's another one. Just again, 26 albums, but go past the Tubular Bell stuff and just dig into some other, like Incantations. I heard is another good one, and there's a bunch of others that I could get into. But he is retired now. He is no longer performing, which I think makes a lot of people sad. But I think he's finally he's decided to retire from music altogether. So, but he's got a wonderful catalog, I'm sure. So one of these days I'll do that deep dive and see how much if there is any, if how much of it actually compares to Tubular Bells, because everything's going to have a little bit of a, because he does these long things, you're always going to have some kind of throwback to something like that. So I don't know. And he was only like 19, 20 years old when he did Tubular Bells. And he pretty much plays almost all the instruments by himself. And in 1973, think about that. You didn't have digital recording. This was done on like a 16 track. He was doing all this on overdubs. Can you imagine?
Yeah, no kidding, huh?
Oh my goodness, that's got to be a engineer's and mixer's nightmare. Putting all those punches in, but it came together. So there you go.
Nice. Yeah, I don't even own Tubular Bells. I just, that's all I know about him.
Yeah.
So
God, well, you can go on Discogs, and I think there's well over 100 plus versions that you could buy of Tubular Bells from all different parts of the world, all different country pressings and stuff like that. It's just, it's unreal. Absolutely nice. Unreal.
Good. All right. My last one is Nick Cave.
Okay.
Now, all I have by Nick Cave is The Boatman's Call. A friend introduced me to this album, and I still love it.
Mm-hmm.
And he made an album in the 80s with the Bad Seeds called The Firstborn is Dead, which I really enjoy. And before he was with the Bad Seeds, he was in a band called The Birthday Party. And they made a few albums, and I think their last album, or at least the third album, was Junkyard. I have that. I found that used a bunch of years ago. That's all I have by Nick Cave.
Okay.
But I love his music. And he's one of the best songwriters of our lives. But I never dug deep. I only have those three. One day, and it's funny because at the beginning of the year, I wrote a list down of all these artists I was going to do a deep dive on this year, or I pick up a lot of their stuff. And I picked up some Chicago. I picked up more of the Chris Whitley albums that I only had burned copies of. I bought some more Jackson Browne. I love John Hyatt, but I don't have all of his stuff. I want to get it all. And I have Nick Cave in there. And I haven't gotten around to picking up a Nick Cave album this year, even though I know he's still putting albums out every year or two, and they're all getting glowing reviews. But I've listened to them and I enjoy them, but I just never did the deep dive. And he has a ton of stuff between his career, Bad Seeds, and Birthday Party. So one day, and I mean, he's changed his sound. He started out goth, and then later on, he kind of went in this old blues sound, and he became more of a singer-songwriter, and then he's made these great avant-garde albums.
Wow.
Like Boatman's Call is pretty accessible, but some of his other stuff, which you'll read like best album of the year lists, and you'll see his name in there all the time
Mm-hmm.
because he's such a creative force. He's still out there touring and still making great music, and he's like 65 now, I think. But one day I will do it. It's
Yep.
just, and I want, and especially if when I'm not working in the corporate world anymore, I'll have the time to digest it.
There you go. Yeah, that's another one. I know the name. I don't know. I don't know why I've never. Again, if I've heard anything, I don't know it off the top of my head. But yeah, that would. I know that name. I certainly know the name. So okay. Well, the last one I'm going to tackle, because I actually do have an honorable mention that we'll talk about those a couple bit too. But this one's not so much an artist. It's just more of a genre. And when people think of the Delta blues, of course, first person they're going to think of pretty quickly usually is either Robert Johnson
Mm-hmm.
or Muddy Waters.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Those are probably the two people that you're going to think of pretty quickly. So, well, how about Roosevelt Sykes? Okay, that's somebody that ran in some of Robert Johnson's circles. Lonnie Johnson,
Oh yeah.
another one. Blind Lemon Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he's a good one. He's good player there. Son House. Honey Boy Edwards. He was with Robert Johnson when he died or when he got poisoned. Skip James, another one.
I'm so glad.
I'm so glad. Charlie Patton,
Mm-hmm.
you got to have him in there. And one of my other favorites, of course, Blind Willie Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there's so much more to the Delta Blues. I mean, I'm looking at this compilation CD called Essential Delta Blues. I picked this up in Clarksdale, Mississippi. And let me see who else is on this thing. Sorry, my eyes are getting bad here. Big Joe Williams. There's another name for you.
Oh, yeah.
Another Johnson, Tommy Johnson, Tony Hollis or Hollins, Buka White. There's another one for you. Sleepy John Estes, Mississippi John Hurt, Robert Lockwood Jr., Bo Carter. Bo Carter back in the day was doing a lot of double entendre type stuff. And there's a couple songs on here that on this thing called, one of them's called Banana in Your Fruit Basket. And the other
Nice.
Classic, My Pencil Won't Write No More. Anyway, so there you go. Robert Petway, Tommy McLennan, John Lee Hooker. We all know who Johnny Lee Hooker is. Elmore James, another one. Arthur Big Boy Crudup, Blind Willie McTell. Let's see, Ishman Bracey. Let me see who else. Big Bill Brunzi. He was the one who took over for Robert Johnson when John Hammond was trying to get him for a Christmas show in New York City, and he wanted to do something with the blues. And he wanted to have Robert Johnson be on it. Well, unfortunately, he had passed away by that point, so he wound up getting Big Bill Brunzi for it. Let's see, Robert Lockwood. I think I said already. Who else is in here? Poor Boy Lofton. Let's see. And yeah, okay, so that's pretty much it. There is so many artists of the Delta Blues, and I'm sure there's probably dozens more out there that you don't get on compilations like this. That would just be an absolute complete retirement project for me to go
Oh
in
my gosh, yeah.
to go in that deep and explore and just see just how many artists I can come across and listen to and understand where they got their influences and who they inspired maybe, or because you think of some of the people that played with like Muddy Waters, like Hubert Sumlin would be one that comes to mind. Of course, Buddy Guy's been around for eons. BB King, all these different people. But I'm just thinking of all the people from like the 20s through the 40s. Just my gosh, I'm sure it would be endless to try and track a lot of that stuff down. So, if you were following all that list, and if you're reading this and if you're watching this in the comments, and you think of somebody that from the Delta period, from the 20s, 30s, 40s that I didn't mention here, throw them in the comments. Johnny Shines, that would be another one. Forgot about Johnny Shines. He was another partner, a friend of Robert Johnson's. But there's so much you could get into with the Delta, and it's so rich. It's so rich in our history. Memphis Mini would probably be another one that would fall in there. Again, it's too many to mention, too many to probably read up and do history of, but it's worth it because these are our serious roots of our music.
Yes.
And that would be not only what I do with the retirement project for the music, but that would be something I would go up and down the Delta Trail and just go and just try and find as many Delta markers on different people all along the way. Just like what could it have been like for these people? My wrestling buddy, she's from the San Antonio era. And I told her about the Gunter Hotel. And she's like, well, why would you want to go see the Gunter Hotel? Well, Robert Johnson recorded some of his songs at a room in the Gunter Hotel in San Antonio. So she said, oh, that's pretty cool. So yeah, I would like to see this place just to say I saw it. But that would definitely be a lifetime retirement project for me.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But one I would so much enjoy. All of these would actually, but I mean the Delta one would definitely be one that I would enjoy the most. So you have an honorable mention or two?
Probably heard me talk about this band on the Contrarians.
Okay.
The Dream Syndicate.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've heard that name.
This is one of my favorite bands, but I didn't get into them until about 7 years ago. But they made 4 albums in the 80s. They're one of the great post-punk bands, but they were from California.
Okay.
And this is Days of Wine and Roses. This is their best album. This was their debut. This is my favorite album from 82. And think about all the great hard rock albums and great albums from other genres that came out in 82, but this is my favorite. Steve Wynn was their main songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
And the Dream Syndicate made 4 albums. They broke up. They didn't make another album again for about 27 years. In the meantime, Steve Wynn went solo, made all these albums, and I could not tell you one song he's done on his own.
Right.
That's where I want to go because I have all the stuff from the Dream Syndicate, and they've made 4 albums since then, all very good. And one thing is they've become so eclectic since they've come back.
Mm-hmm.
They've made some excellent stuff, but I've never heard his solo stuff.
Yeah.
So and supposedly he's got a ton of albums. So that's one I would like to do. And the other one I was thinking of, doesn't have a lot of albums. David Byrne.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Now, love his stuff with the Talking Heads. Don't own a single solo album. Some Live, his solo show, one of the best shows I've ever seen. Just thinking about it still blows me away. But I have none of his solo stuff. And he, again, another very eclectic songwriter. You saw hints of it in the Heads.
Yeah.
but he went into he went totally
Like
into
almost,
different directions on his own.
he does like a lot of world music type stuff now,
He did.
mostly. Yeah.
Yeah, especially early on, it was very big into world music.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's his last album was kind of going back to the heads a little bit.
Hmm.
But you know, you could still say it was still Byrne. I mean, and Byrne
Yeah.
wasn't the heads. I mean, Byrne was the primary songwriter, but
It
I
was
think
all
it was
four of them.
it was all four of them that made that sound. I mean, at the end, it was kind of becoming Byrne's baby. But if you listen to Fear of Music and Remain in Lights and more songs about buildings and food, that's great collective.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a shame that you'll never see those guys get back together.
Yeah, I know.
I don't think Byrne wants to do it. He has no interest in doing it. And it's a shame because I think the other three would love to do it, but don't think it's going to happen. But
Jerry Harrison, I mean, he became a great producer after that. He
mhm,
produced the first few live albums. I mean, so
yeah,
amongst a lot of other stuff. So yeah, he's busy, but yeah, he'd do it, but Byrne holds the key,
yep. So yeah, so David Byrne, just help, just make some Talking Heads fans happy. Just do it. You can handle it, right? Anyway, so my two I'm not going to spend much time on one, but Phil Kagi.
Okay.
I love Phil Kagi. Only have a couple albums of his, but he's another one that's got a ton of material ranging from rock to band stuff to straight up acoustic stuff. And it's the straight up acoustic stuff that I probably love the most. It's just absolute gorgeous stuff. When I've had a rough day at work, sometimes this album here, this one here called Beyond Nature, it's just all acoustic, and it's just, if I just need to chill out, that's a great album to listen to. And
Nice.
just beautiful stuff, beautiful stuff. Um, the last one I want to honorable mention. I do not have anything by him, but I've met the man once because he actually lived here in Birmingham before he passed away, and I did a little bit of stuff for his wife, Miss Myra, who would come into the store and would do some different things, you know, regarding his career and different stuff like that. And I'm talking about this fella. His name is Cleve Eaton, and he was a jazz bass player, a jazz double bassist. Did a lot of producing, arranging, composing, publisher, and he headed up a little record company actually here in the Birmingham area. Um, he played with the Count Basie orchestra for a little while in the 70s and the 80s. Was also known with a fella with the Ramsey Lewis trio. That was another thing he was well into.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he had a 1975 album called Plenty Good Eatin', which is considered a classic in the funk music genre. Um, sadly, yeah, he only has about 6 albums as a leader. He's done numerous things with Ramsey Lewis. Um, looks like about 10 things with the Count Basie Orchestra, mostly from about 80 to 92. And there's a bunch of the other things that he was a part of. Sadly, he did pass away just a couple years ago. He wasn't doing well health wise, but his wife, Miss Myra, is an absolute spitfire. Just a wonderful lady. She was had some bad health too. Um, and I know unfortunately she's her and Cleve unfortunately fell into the problems that a lot of musicians, both black and white, ran into, in that they're not seeing much of anything when it comes to royalties because they got shafted out of it, a lot of it because of
Gotcha.
bad record contracts or bad decision making and stuff like that. So once in a while, Seasick Records here in town, they have a guy come in and they sell off some stuff from Cleve's, um, you know, his own personal collection. So, and it's cash only. So, and I've heard some of the stuff is not cheap. It's pretty expensive. Like some of these 45s, like 75, $80 or something like that. But
Mm.
it's going to help Myra and her bills and her health bills and stuff like that. I don't know if I hope she's still with us. She's a wonderful lady. I haven't seen her in a while, but she was very, very frail the last time I saw her. But I always said I would love to listen to some of his stuff just to hear what an Alabama legend, because he's in the Hall of Fame, Alabama Music Hall of Fame, and the Jazz Hall of Fame here. And so he would be somebody that I would be willing to I would love to hear some of it, some of what he was a part of. So there you go.
Nice.
So retirement projects, good Lord, we could all that would keep us busy for the rest of our lives.
Oh yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's good stuff. That would be something, that's all something good to look forward to. So the lingo's here. Like, share, subscribe, ring those bells so you know when another video is coming. What's your retirement project? What are bands or artists that you like, that you want to dive deep into and just really digest and understand and appreciate? Let us know in the comments. John the Music Note, we got some odds and ends of stuff coming up or that has come out. Give me the rundown real quick. What are we looking forward to coming up from you?
Okay. I just filmed a show at Peter Kerr, Rock Daydream Nation. It's not out yet. Favorite rock songs that are under 3 minutes long is coming Friday.
Okay.
Joe Beck, Peter Kerr, and I will be back on Peter's channel, Rock Daydream Nation, talk about our favorite 3 albums by the Scorpions.
Oh, okay.
So I got that
going.
Yeah, I got that coming up, and I think we did a Wall Punchers episode on Grand Swamp Warehouse.
That was hilarious. I watched that whole thing. That was hilarious.
Well, I'm glad you found it hilarious, because we're talking part 2. We might be doing it next week. We just got to look at our schedules and see.
Okay.
We'll do it live again.
All right.
And we're just got to figure out how our schedules are going to work.
Okay.
But if we do it, it'll be either beginning of September or the end, because in the middle a lot of us are on vacation.
Yeah.
So, but if we can bang it out next week, it would be pretty awesome. But
okay.
we just don't have it lined up yet.
Okay. Well, let's see. With me, well, of course I just had John the Music Nut on a recent episode with my North and South rock and metal connection, talking wrestling, talking Bray Wyatt and Terry Funk for all the wrestling fans out there, and that was wonderful, getting to bring in friends of mine from different parts of my life. I have my music friends meeting with my DDPY friends, and
right.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. It's like it was kind of like when on Sea of Tranquility at this, when Labonte and Martin and all the personalities were in the same room, and Pete Pardo just looks like, this is freaking awesome. That's how it was for me. But anyway, so we had that. I did something with Peter Kerr, talking about Coverdale Page, which was a wonderful discussion. Absolutely loved that album. Loved the discussion with Mike Lodano. Of course, Peter Kerr.
Tim Durling was on there.
Tim Durling and Reed Little were all on it. So it was just a wonderful discussion between the 5 of us. And that's pretty much it. I don't think I have anything upcoming other than our stuff. So this is a good thing. So yeah. So like I said, like, share, subscribe. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you tell us what your retirement projects are. I'd love to hear them. Let's get into that discussion. All right. So
absolutely.
Next week, I don't have it on me. Next week, we start Armored Saint. Album by album, studio albums for Armored Saint. So that's going to be our next album, our band series that we're going to do. We're both looking forward to that. So for my co-captain, John the Music Nut, John Clauser, Johnny Metal, the Metal Dad, from my music corner, we have done the 5 count now with music, so this is a good thing. We'll see next week when we tackle the Madhouse and we try to deliver on Armored Saint. Peace out.
Take care.